mostly yeses and some nos, which merits some instruction in regards to it as always. So I will go into that when we talk about masks and layers in it. For some of you, that'll be a bit reiterative, but there's not a ton of it in today's workshop, so that's good to know. I'm definitely seeing more and more familiarity every time I do workshops, which is something that I think is really exciting. Lots of people use ACDSee to edit their actually the vast majority of ACDSee's users are people that use it for just editing their personal photography, just making tweaks and sort of adjusting it. And we have a portion of our user base too that does professional photography, but for the most part, it's definitely more geared towards and oriented towards people who are exploring their own photography. Anyway, that being said, kind of my point there is, if that's the case, there's a lot of opportunity to try new things, right? And like, there's a lot of opportunity to play around with different tools and explore the software more broadly, because you're not under the sort of you're not under any major time crunches for your clients. And then on top of that too, you're not beholden to anyone, so you can kind of just play around and see what you like. And so the purpose of this is, when we do workshops, both myself and Rodrigo, when we do workshops, we talk a lot about tools in ACDSee. It gives us a meaningful avenue to sort of come at it, because we have there's lots of tools in ACDSee that people don't understand yet, because they're either new or they were introduced a couple issues ago in regards to our product. And so we like to sort of familiarize people with those things. These tools today, I think, broadly aren't new. They're actually quite old. So we have the benefit of getting to the bottom of some of these things. Okay, I have my tea. That's good. So today we're going to talk about Liquify as a tool. We're going to talk about refining edges. Really useful, especially when it comes to, when it comes to selections. We're going to talk about layer effects. We're going to talk about special effects, actually. There's a couple special effects I really like, and I want to talk about those. And then we're going to talk about tilt shift if we have time as well, which is a very simple tool. So it'll be a sort of a point and click kind of thing for that, but we'll talk about all those. If you have any questions during the workshop, fire them in the Q&A panel. That's always helpful to me. That's where I can see them and answer them best. Questions that don't pertain to the workshop, I'll try to answer at the end if I have time and if I can. And otherwise, you can always just contact me over our community page. So you can just fire me a message there, and I try to get back to people as fast as I can. The last thing I'll say before we begin is, if you need to dip out halfway through, or if you don't have time or whatever, no worries. We always upload these workshops to YouTube. So you'll be able to go to our YouTube page and see our workshops a couple days after the workshop has concluded. So I will make sure to upload that. Our previous workshop on black and white photography is available on our YouTube page, as well as the previous one I did prior to Christmas on bokeh photos. So, okay, so I think I'm going to start with Liquify, actually. Yeah, let's start with Liquify. So Liquify is a tool. Let's play around with it. I'm going to take, I've chosen a bunch of sort of bird images to play around with in regards to this tool. So Liquify is a tool that's made to exaggerate or minimize certain things in your images. So I'm just going to open it up right away, and we'll just play around with it really quickly, and I'll show you and I'll sort of explain what it does. So Liquify is located under the geometry pane in the filter menu. So in the filters, they're sort of broadly categorized into sections. For example, we have AI in relation to face editing and sky replacement. We have enhancing images. Enhancing are generally like spot adjustments. These are primarily sort of oriented around faces, like the red eye reduction and the skin tone, but there's also the repair tool there as well. Then we just have the add tool, which literally adds something to your image, whether it be a watermark, a border, or your special effect or a vignette or something like that. And then we have geometry, which is what Liquify is under. I'll just close the other three, which are probably the most used. Exposure and lighting literally adjusts like the lighting and brightness in your images. Color adjusts the color. And then detail adjusts the sort of like grain in your images. But geometry changes the shape of your image. And geometry is non-destructive. And actually a good note in regards to, as always, when we're interacting with the filter menu in edit mode, all of these tools are destructive. Destructive. These are destructive changes to an image. And all I mean by that is that if you were to save this image as an editable file, as an ACDSee file, after you're done making some changes to it, none of these things are really going to be something you can interact with in the future. You can further warp your image, but you can't go back. So what we do using ACDSee when we're interacting with the filter menu is we create a duplicate of our image. And so what that does, so I'm going to navigate over to the layer panel. So the layer panel is on the right. Broadly speaking, what appears on the right is non-destructive. Okay, so these are the non-destructive tools on the right and our destructive tools on the left. Broadly speaking, what appears on the right is non-destructive. And so the way that we basically enable ourselves to hold on to this original image in our layer order is by duplicating the image, because the duplicated image that we have right here, this is the image that's going to be altered. And then that means we still have the original image in our layer order here. I'm just realizing I don't have my mouse highlight on, so I'm going to turn that on here. There we go. Oh, way better. Okay. So when we make changes using the filter menu, always create a duplicate of your file. And this enables you to still save this as an editable file and be able to make changes based on or predicated on the original image and be able to see the changes that you made using the filter menu. This will all become much more simple to see in a moment here. But for right now, I'm just going to rename this and I'm just going to call it Liquify. Yeah, Florence, great question. So to make a duplicate of the original image in edit mode, all you need to do is right click on the layer itself and click duplicate, which appears the second from the bottom here. The other thing you can do is, I hovered over it briefly, but underneath the adjustment layers, so basically layers right here, adjustment layers right here, and then underneath the adjustment layers is this row of effects. Note that duplicate appears the third from the left here. And duplicate does the exact same thing as right-clicking on your layer and duplicating it like that. So I'm going to click that, and that's what duplicates the image. Do you see that, Florence? Does that make sense? Okay, so basically, once we have our duplicated image, awesome, I'm glad, thank you. What we're going to do is, how do you get the actions tab on the right side? The actions tab. The actions tab, or all of these tools that appear on the right-hand side, are ones that you would require the ultimate product for that has layers and adjustment layers. So that would be the first thing. And if AI actions doesn't appear there, what you can do is you can go to panes, I believe. And on panes, there will be the ability to open AI actions, which appears right there. Yeah. So I'm going to take this image and I'm going to pull it into Liquify. If you go to geometry and you go to Liquify, that's going to open up the Liquify tool. So, and apparently an enormous image version of our image. Oops. What happened here? There we go. Seems to be glitching. I'm going to reopen it here. That's odd. Okay. There we go. So it opens up the Liquify tool. And I'll share that at the end, Bill. I'm using the most recent version, so ACDSee Photo Studio Ultimate 2024. And I'm using Windows as the operating system. We do most of our workshops on the PC product. So when I have this open, just gonna hide this. We have the Liquify tool opens up, and the Liquify tool is broken into essentially 4 different tools. Although the last one I think is a bit reiterative, because if you're using a mouse with a right button, you can undo your actions. So the first tool itself is Shift. Shift literally moves elements around. The second tool is a tool called Pinch. And Pinch pulls the elements inwards. It sort of draws them inwards and makes them smaller. And then the third tool is the bulge tool. And so what the bulge tool does is the bulge tool increases the size in relation to the pixels that you're, selecting with your mouse. And then finally, the last tool is the restore tool. But if you're using a mouse, what you can do is you can certainly select the restore tool to sort of undo these actions. But the other thing you can do is you can be using another tool and simply right click on using your mouse here to undo these actions. So before I opened up this image, I mentioned that Liquify is used to, it's a distortion tool fundamentally. But what it's typically used for is to exaggerate parts of your image, to sort of and historically how this has been used, at least in photography, is basically to touch up images of people. And I don't have no problem with people doing that, when it's asked for, but I typically don't like to, touch up images of people. It feels a bit rude. So what I like to do is instead use an animal as a subject, a bit more impartial of a subject. So I'll sort of showcase this using a different image here, I think. So in this case too, what we can do is we can elongate certain features. Like for example, the beak here, I can take this beak and I can sort of draw it outwards using the Shift tool. I can even take parts like the eye and make them larger if I wanted to by just selecting them there. And then I can sort of pinch parts of my image around the edges, and this kind of does a process of smoothing them, but also drawing them inwards, as you can see here. And so I can change the shape of my image in relation to these things. The other thing that's worth noting is sometimes when you do this to your image, you'll notice that parts of your image will, you'll get this checkerboard that'll appear on the edges of your image. Let's see if I can get this effect. Yeah, there you go. So because we're only working with the existing pixels in the image, when you pull too exaggeratedly in one direction, what happens is it will replace that with no pixel information. And so just a note that when you're using Liquify, there's no way to get around this. You can sort of push these elements back if you'd like. But the other thing you can do is you can always just crop out the edge of your image because they only ever appear on the edge of your image. So just a note that if you're interacting with the tool itself, that may occur. It also very much might not occur if you're only doing very subtle adjustments. Typically, when you're seeing that in the background, that's kind of an indicator that you're doing pretty exaggerated changes to your image. So here I am just kind of making some subtle changes to my image. And we can maybe make a comparison between the before and sort of the changes that I've made in the image. Now, again, like how this has been used in the past is to sort of like tuck people's facial features in to sort of bring in their cheekbones. It's sort of used to, I change the shape of people's bodies, whether it be to like make them perceivably look like they have thinner waists or something like that. These are ways that this has been used. But in terms of, working with something like wildlife photography, it can be used to sort of exaggerate certain features and draw certain attention to certain details. The other thing that I think that this is really useful for that kind of isn't either of these things is taking an image like we have of our skateboarder here I'll open this up and I'll make a duplicate of it. What we can do is we can use the Liquify tool to sort of pull our subject further towards us by using the bulge tool. And I'll see if I can get a version of this on my subject that is subtle enough without overly distorting him. So I'm just going to run my mouse around him here. And then once he's sufficiently bulged, I'm just going to take in certain elements here while verifying. Here, let's take in his head. There we go. We can probably enlarge this slightly. I might zoom in slightly too. So you can take photos, in this case, with a neutral background, kind of action-oriented photos, and you can enlarge these photos. And it gives a bit of a, in this case, it's changing obviously the shape of the man, but it's also pulling him sort of towards us. I might actually increase the density of this, and we'll see. Let's see. So changing both the shape of the subject is what we can do in regards to this, but we can also kind of take this and universally apply it to a subject on a neutral background and sort of pull him up front. And if I want to sort of compare the two, I can look at that. And if I want, actually, I could do something like crop this image. Let's just crop it like that using a different effect. And then I could do something as simple as like adding a gradient map. And that would be kind of like a fun way to do sort of like an action shot in regards to a subject. Oops, that's definitely too dark. I'll go back and showcase this again. Oops. That's definitely wants to be blue. Here we go. Let's change this. There we go. So you can get certain cool effects by popping someone up. So again, this is sort of a before and after in regards to the subject here. Just with a gradient effect on it. Yeah, it depends on the. That's a great question, Bill. So if I go back into the tool here, and maybe if I just use my original subject here, this guy right here, if I make I think the largest I can go is this size in relation to the subject. But if the subject in your image is small enough, then you can cover it with the nib in this case. That's why I sort of illustrated it by covering the subject here. And then what I did is I went back afterwards and sort of smoothed out anything. You can sort of find a medium between that, although it's easier to do, obviously, when he's a bit smaller like that. Then that way you can kind of cover the whole subject. So anyway, in summary, in regards to this, Liquify basically is four things. It's the ability to sort of change the place of pixels on your image by pulling them and expanding them outwards. It's the ability to sort of pinch elements inwards, making them smaller, and the reverse of that with the bulge function. This is a tool that warps things. So by warping it, you're going to change the relationship of the pixels in your image. You're stretching them out, you're shrinking them, that sort of thing. There are tasteful and subtle ways to apply this effect. There's also very exaggerated ways to apply this effect. In regards to our sort of first example, just going to undo that. In regards to our first example with the bird, we could be very, very subtle with this. I could take this tool, for example, and this other bird, and literally just decide, hey, I want to just widen the size of this bird slightly here. I could just take it and just pull it outwards and make the bird appear larger. And that can be the extent of my change to this image, which, first of all, doesn't look like it's too disruptive over this image. And maybe if I wanted to, to draw more attention to the bird itself, I'd make the eye a little bit larger. That's a little bit more exaggerated. There's something a little bit subtle about that change on its own. So there's ways to play around with Liquify in really cool ways. Yeah, but just focusing basically on pulling your subject further, or pulling the nib selection further away to sort of change the shape of it, or to make it pull it inwards using pinch, or to bulge it using the bulge tool. And any of these things can be corrected using the sort of erase function, or simply by right clicking on your image here. Okay, let's talk about let's sort of switch gears and talk about refine edge. Does anyone have any more questions in relation to Liquify before I move on? Feel free to add them to our Q&A panel here. Hopefully that answered your question, Bill. The answer is sort of, depending on the size of your image. The nib width has a extent that it can go to. The image I'm going to open up here is a good example of a common issue that I see in regards to refining edge. So when you're going to have issues with refine edge, it's going to be because you have a light background. Sometimes this may occur if you have a black background and you're moving towards a light background, but this one is definitely going to be oriented towards looking at an image that has a white background. And when we go to make a selection of our image, there's going to be something that's basically like a residual halo that appears around our image. And this, pardon me, is simply a limitation of making sort of a automated selection of our image. These can be removed by either taking manual selection processes or doing what we're about to do, which is exploring a refine edge function. Deborah asked, is there a version with edit function in for Mac? So I believe that Mac in its current version right now has only a develop mode. We have not added a layer editor yet to Mac. However, that is something that is going to be added to Mac. I just can't tell you when that is. The current version of Mac, I believe, just features the develop editor. The develop editor in ACDSee, the PC product, basically the professional product, and the Mac product is functionally equivalent. There are so many similarities in regards to those two, but the edit mode in the Mac product is not equivalent. It doesn't feature an editor. So this is the case, obviously, for Mac, and then obviously for professional and home editions of the PC product, they don't feature the editing functions that that Ultimate does in relation to layers, adjustment layers, and some of the AI function. So hopefully that answers your question. They are not historically, ACDSee was a PC product, and so our Mac development has been put into hyperdrive over the last couple of years to sort of come up to the PC product, but it is still it still needs work, and it's still kind of coming to that point. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so we're going to talk about refine edge. So refine edge, the best way to showcase this, okay, is to make a selection of our subject. So our subject here being this this woman, we're going to select her using the select subject function. Note that I can add to this subject selection, and notably, I would want to add this white shoe here, but for the purpose of this demonstration, we can omit that. It's not needed. But note that that is something that we would add. There's also a little bit of the coat that we missed right here. But this is a pretty good selection. And this saved us probably, like a 35 minutes of selecting in one click. So when we're looking at this, when we go to make a mask of this, I'll mask my image, and I'll just repeat that to showcase what I've done here. And this will help for people who have less familiarity with layers and adjustment layers and masking. When we make a selection, everybody, what happens is it basically puts this, excuse me, this selection highlight over top of our image. The selection highlight is indicated by this red here. It could also be indicated by marching ants if that's how you have your tool set up. I always go to select whenever I'm start using an ACDSee product, go over to the overlay options and change it to selection highlighted. This is my preferred method of selection. But that all that red indicates to us is that we have an active selection, something that is going to be altered when we make changes. How do we make changes? There are 3 ways we make changes to this. The first way is that we just add an adjustment layer. For example, we add curves. I'm going to curve out my image. There's a nice little dark curve there. Okay. That's the first way. Note that when I apply the curves function, what is it being applied to? Well, what it's being applied to is in relation to the mask that we see right here. So the mask that we see is this little black box. And this little black box showcases a white portion, right? That's the area that is affected. And it shows the black portion, which is the area that is not affected by this adjustment. Let's showcase this once more in a different way. I'm just going to delete that mask, delete that layer, and reselect our subject using the select subject function. This time, let's just, I don't know, split tone our image. I'll click split tone. Split tone will once again add a mask to my image. Looking at my mask, you can see that my subject is the one that is highlighted or white that's going to be affected by these changes. And then you can see that my background or this black area around my image, the part of my image that wasn't selected, is going to be omitted from these adjustments. Let's just change the highlights. So we'll add a blue highlight saturation and I don't know, we'll add like a warm shadow saturation and just crank the values. So you can see that this affects our subject, but not our background. Okay. Let's just draw your attention towards the mask very briefly. When we look at a mask, the part that is white is functionally turned on, okay? So the effect that is applied to the area will be applied to the white area. That's turned on. The effect will not be applied to the black area. That's the area where this effect is turned off. Okay, with that in mind, when we make a selection of our subject, so when I click select subject and I mask my image, when I mask my image, the 3 ways that we can affect a selection is by adjustment layers, it's by creating a mask, or it's by going into an independent filter with the selection active and making an effect based on the selection that you've changed. So there's a way to do it in filter menu. There's a way to do it in the adjustment layers menu. And importantly, there's a way to mask our image. So we have an active selection. When we go to add layer mask, what we're going to see is an image that now removes the background. And the reason why it removes the background is because I'm telling ACDSee, I'm saying, hey, I want you to select my subject. And then I'm telling it, hey, I want you to show my mask, okay? And I want you to mask based on my selection. So show me my selection and don't show me what I haven't selected. Now that I've masked my image, I'm going to deselect, which means to remove my selection. So what we have here is we have our subject. She is selected. She has pixel values, meaning we can see her. And then the background is invisible. And the way that ACDSee presents invisible or 0 pixel values is by showcasing you this funky little checker box pattern. Do you remember when I was talking about Liquify and I said when you move certain pixels away from the background, the checker box is filled? Again, it's the same thing. It's just ACDSee's way to showcase that there's no pixel values there. When there's no pixel values there, we can do some pretty cool things. For example, I can put an entirely new image in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my film strip image here. I'm going to drag and drop it, put it underneath my subject by pulling the image and dragging it to the bottom. And now I have a whole new image in the background that looks awful, but it showcases my point. So we have two images here. The pixels in the background are no longer transparent because I have something in front of them. So imagine it like this. In this area is invisible pixels, so it's transparent. Then we have our subject here when turned on and visible. Oh, pardon me, still recovering from a cold. We have our background image, and then we have our masked image. And all our masked image, when we're looking at our mask, says, hey, this area of our image is turned on, and this area of our image is turned off. Yeah, it does look kind of funky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to showcase what refine edge is and why this is relevant. Instead of using that previous image, which has too many colors, so it's going to make this hard to see, I'm going to use the add a blank layer button to add a blank layer here. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate over to the fill tool. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill this with a color. So I have my fill tool. I selected on my foreground color picker. I selected a color. I clicked OK. And I'm going to click the background. That fills my background with the color. Now, you probably have already noticed that there is a white halo that appears around our subject here. This is a limitation of selections. And what I mean by that is when we make selections, it still kind of selects a little bit of the edge, right? When we really zoom in, there's still a little bit of that white background that appears just because the automation process in regards to selecting around our subject still comes with some limitations. Here's a really good example. There's tons of little white pixels in here that are very much visible to the eye. Same right here. Same right here. This is the case when obviously you're interacting with an image that has a strong white background. This is going to be the most prevalent then. And the reason why is because there's such a contrast between the black color of this woman's dress and the background, which was sort of a almost marbled white part. So, okay, so we understand masking. We understand that we have a layer behind us, and we understand what the problem is. The problem is, hey, I have these areas of my image that I want to refine. So when we refine edge, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to either expand or contract the edge of my selection. Let's showcase that. I'm going to delete this mask. So I'm presented with my original image without a mask, which means that I can now see my background again because the background is turned on. By default, the background will always be turned on. It is only masks that change that relationship, or opacity and blending, but that's another issue. I'm going to select my subject, and instead of masking it right away, okay, I'm going to do something completely different. Instead of masking it right away, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to refine. And I'll click refine, and it'll open up a series of options. So BDM asked an interesting question. Does the resolution of the original also affect the granularity of the selection? And I want to say sometimes it does. I think the higher resolution you have is going to definitely improve the overall appearance of the image. However, you're still going to see a degree of like sort of edge or haloing around the edge. It's just a limitation of how pixels are selected. So just because you increase the number of pixels in your image doesn't necessarily make this problem go away. It maybe just makes this problem more granular, like you're sort of describing. So I think that the answer would be marginally it may. Yeah. I mean, these images that I'm working with aren't huge. Like they're 2000 pixels by 2000 pixels. So it's not an enormous image. If you're working with an image that's like 30,000 pixels by 50,000 pixels, and you have this degree of control around the edge of your image, you're probably going to see a little bit easier problem to handle. It may still require you to refine the edge. So when I open up the refine edge tool, I'm presented with this sort of yellow. I mean, I don't know what by default color this is. You can change the color of the selection. I could change to blue if I wanted. But you're going to see this selection again, sort of a preview of what part of your image is going to be essentially subject to masking. So if we zoom in, we can see a little bit better. This is a good example region. Now I can shift this edge away, so I can make it greater than my image. And note that when I go to mask, if I had done it like this, pardon me, that whole edge would be included. So the section that you see here, the blue part, that would be included in my selection and therefore would be masked accordingly. If I go to remove this or to shift the edge further away from my image, then we have a severe degree of loss on our image, right? We would be losing this part of our neck because it would not be included. We'd be losing probably whole details in regards to our hand. So this is too great of a change, right? So what we need to find is 0 is the amount that's default, right? We just need to remove a little bit. We need to remove like -7. Maybe even that's too great. Why don't we try -5? And what this is going to do is it's going to take in the edge of my image only marginally. So we're going to lose a little bit around the edge of this. But the benefit of this is I'm going to remove that halo entirely. So you can see the edge of my image here. And you can play around with these values to sort of take control of how much you want to lose around the edge of your image. So I'll just go with -5. We'll try it out. I'll click done. And now when I go to mask my image, oops, didn't mean to do that. That issue is not present in the same way that was present previously, right? That's night and day. So it has almost removed all of the sort of edge issue, that haloing that we see around the edge. Now, we did it at, albeit a cost of 5 pixels around the edge of my image, but you know, you can take that into consideration. Those 5 pixels might not be that much of a deal in regards to the overall image, especially when we're using our selection in a way that is going to be for photographic art and not necessarily to replicate the circumstance of the original image. So Refine Edge is a crazy powerful tool that allows you to sort of remove any issues here. And this is most powerful, I think, when we're dealing with an image that's going to be composed upon a background that is darker than it. Now, a good example is when I have a Refine Edge and I'm just replacing it with like a white background, I got no issue, right? That white background is going to hide that white halo that I saw from the white background of the previous image. No issues. This is only when we're dramatically changing the sort of darkness of the background from something that it came from. And the reverse is true, right? If I'm going from like a black halo around the edge of my image to a black background, no problems. So Refine Edge is powerful, very cool tool. Again, it's a 2-step process. Navigate to select subject or some form of selection that you have active, and then just simply refine. Go to select and refine, and that'll allow you to refine the edge here. Melissa asks, is there a way to refine just a small part of the selection line? I've come across a situation where the auto select a tree, for example, behind the subject's head, but I can't figure out how to change just that small part of the selection. Yeah, so I alluded to this earlier, but I didn't really talk about it. Note that, okay, so refine a part of a selection. So what Melissa's asking here is she's like, hey, I've got a really good selection, but I have one thing that is omitted in my selection. I have the same problem as you, Melissa, right? So as you can see here, let's just use the hand tool. Do you see this part? That's been omitted in my selection. This shoe has also been omitted in my selection. There are 2 ways to incorporate these into your selections if they're not. I'll showcase that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move in, I'm going to zoom in after I've selected my subject. And what I'm going to do is I navigate to this portion of my image that I want to incorporate. Can you see that? I can do one of two things. I can use the brush selection tool, and I can use the shape selection tool. And for this one, I will probably use the brush selection tool. With the brush selection tool active, I'm going to turn smart brushing on, and that allows me to basically brush in this element here. So this is a smart brushing. Ooh, I should really turn down the tolerance. There we go. That adds this portion of my image. Do you see that? Let me know if you see that. That's one way I can use the smart brushing tool to add to my existing selection. Okay, I'm going to show you a different way. This might be more relevant depending on your composition. So you see my shoe here. Let's see. Can I hide this? This is kind of irritating this moment. There we go. I'm going to select the shape selection tool. And this is super important. When you select the shape selection tool, make sure you've selected additive selection. All this means is that by default, it's a new selection. If you were to make a new selection, you would lose your selected subject. But if you're in additive selection, when I go to add to this selection, it's literally just going to incorporate my new element here into my existing automated AI selection. So what I'm going to do is with the shape selection active, I'm just going to go around and I'm going to add her shoe to my selection. And once I have added it, I will double click. And upon double clicking, oh, I guess I have to commit. I commit it and it gets added. So there it is. I have added my shoe to my selection. And now when I go to refine my edge, those will be incorporated into the refining process. There you go. Okay, there was another question by Graham. Shape selection tool is very powerful. Very cool tool. I don't think I showcased it there, but I think you can also bend your selection shapes. Let me see if I can do this. You can, is there a way to, oh, maybe not in this tool. What was the tool that I was thinking of? Disregard that. I'm telling lies. Okay. Graham asked, is there a plan to implement this in develop? I've noticed this with AI selection. It seems to need a feather or similar. AI selections have been actually added to the develop tool, like you're saying, but the refining tool is not present in it yet. The difference being in develop mode, you don't have the ability to interact with layers. So you're not probably going to see this like haloing up here as much because you're not changing the background composition. But I take your point. I don't know if it is. I think that would be something to talk to the developers about. So maybe reach out to me just privately over text in our portal, and I'll just like fire that suggestion off to the developers. We have a couple more other questions before we go on. I see you are pretty accurate when you added points. Are you using a pen or a mouse? I'm using a mouse. I don't actually have a pen, but that certainly could be a way to increase your accuracy if you're more familiar with it. Is there a mouse keyboard command for the done button? Oh, yeah. I don't know. Like the commit section. Very good question. Very good question. Keyboard shortcut guide. Let's check it out. Let's entertain this question right now. Okay, so this would be under the shape selection tool in the toolbar menu. Okay, let's see if we can find it here. Okay, viewing, managing, edit menu, viewing, customizing the interface, selecting, selects all, invert selection, deselects, saves the selection, loads them, filters, working inside, layer editor, layer masks, adjustment layers, tools. Here we go. So we're in the Let's see here. Elliptical line polygon tool. No, I don't believe there is. Great suggestion. Something to just mention that to me. That is an awesome selection to be able to add, commit, or discard. Can you, yeah, please, Monk, if you don't mind, message me on the community portal, and I'll make sure that that gets added. That's a great suggestion. And then the anonymous asked to deselect the white background between her thumb and fingers. To deselect it. Okay, so much like we had an additive selection, okay, I'm going to zoom in to this portion that anonymous is referring to. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the subtract from selection instead of the additive selection. By clicking subtract from selection, I can just create a little section here and click commit, and that'll be removed. Great question. Same is the case for the brush selection tool. If I had the brush selection tool active, all I would do is I would right click in the area rather than left click. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about layer effects briefly. Yeah, we can actually use this image too. I'm going to refine it once more and we'll use this image. So I'm just going to refine it. We'll go -5 like we had before. And we'll mask it now that it's refined. Beauty. There's our image. It's refined. Yeah, maybe we'll add a slight feathering to it, like a feather of 1. There we go. Okay, so layer effects are effects that can be applied to your second layer in your layer order, or anything above your second layer. Layer effects are a way to add some pretty cool functions. Let's talk about them. So I'm going to take my layer here, which is my subject. Okay. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the FX, the layer effects tool, which is right down here. And when I open it, it's going to bring up this little modal box. So a pop-up box. And then what I can do is I can add a series of effects to whatever layer I'm interacting with. The layer effects, when we close this, you'll notice that they have a little FX pop-up that appears right here. And that indicates to us that this layer has an active effect applied to it. Layer effects are relative to the layer you're interacting with them, meaning that they don't apply to all layers that exist beneath them. They're relative to the layer. So let's look at some of the effects just before we adjust them. So inner glow adds a glow to the container of your image. Basically, whatever you've masked, it now has a glow within it. There's inner shadow, which does the exact same thing, except it's a shadow instead of a glow. Bevel, I can create a bevel effect or bevel and emboss effect on my image. I can outline my image. I can outline it in a variety of different ways, but I can outline my image here. I can blur my image. So I can blur in relation to the mask. This is also doable as an adjustment layer, but the benefit of doing it as an FX layer is that it means you don't have to clip to or click the clip to button above the blur in relation to the effect. So very powerful to do it as a layer effect rather than a adjustment layer. And then I can make a shadow. I can make a shadow in the background. So truth be told, I think I'd prefer to add an inner shadow. And I think that inner shadow, I'd like that inner shadow to be a color that's probably similar to the background, because that sort of mimics the light effect of the background, right? That's natural. It'd be natural for our background to have an effect on our subject, right? Because those colors are going to have some degree of reflectivity in them, provided that they're not black, which is wholly unreflective. And that gives us the ability to, and then increase the blur. So in our image, you can see that more, less, right? So maybe somewhere in the middle. And then the distance, so how far it goes into our subject here. And then I have the ability to lower the opacity or increase the opacity or completely change the blend mode. So I can go to hard light if I wanted to have a really egregious effect, or like subtract to get a blue, or I could do darken, or in this case, I believe we start with multiply. Overlay might look nice. There's lots of different ways to get this effect, but I like an inner shadow. I think it looks good. It also draws attention to your subject in a way. The other one that's very commonly used is a drop shadow, or shadow in this case. And once again, what we'd probably want to do is we'd want to select our background. Oops. So I'll select my background color. Notably, if I was just to create a drop shadow using this color, it's going to have no effect on the background. So what we want to do is we want to go to our color selection, and then I'm just going to increase the darkness of the color. So I'm going to take this color and I'm going to pull it down, and that will create a shadow, right? And because that shadow is the same color as our background, or at least a composed of colors in our background, it's going to have a sort of a natural look to it. And then I can create my blur a little bit more dramatic, or I can make it a little bit more concise, basically using the blur tool. I can increase the distance to sort of give it like a silhouette appearance, and click close. So I can use these effects to get really different changes to my image. Excuse me. Graham asks, this reminds me, I added some text and did a drop shadow on the text. I then added some different text in a different place and struggled to apply a drop shadow to that text, or vice versa. I can't remember. But anyway, I struggled to get a uniform dropped shadow on all my text. Yeah, again, I think that's in relation to the relative aspect of the FX tool. But I think the way to get around this, Graham, if I may, would be to merge those two layers. So if I was to add text, right, and I liked my text, let's say I like my text. I don't like my text, Graham, but if I did like my text, it would look something like that. And then say I had a duplicate of my text, and it's over here now, right? And then, so I have two texts, right? So you're like, hey, I have a problem. I want to add a drop shadow to one of my texts. And if I make that drop shadow too big, let's say I make it too big, let's reduce the blur, increase the distance. And you're like, oh man, it interacts with my other text because my text is on another layer. Let's add a drop shadow to this one too. There, I got two texts with different distances. I think the way to get around this, Graham, would be to first and foremost remove your text effects. And then I think the way to do this would be to, let's remove this too. Why isn't it? Oh, there we go. I'll remove my shadow here. And then it removes the effects on both. My suggestion, I think, would be to take this text and let's see if it's, oh, I can't merge this text layer down. Oh, I can't do that at all. Why not? Maybe I can rasterize these two layers? No, it only, oh no, but now I can merge it down. Awesome. Rasterize layer, merge down, text layer, FX layer, shadow, and there you go. Boom. It's underneath both. Kind of a clunky way to do that, but hey, in a very specific case scenario, that would be your answer. So unfortunately, we can no longer edit this text, Graham. So your text would have to be perfect, but that does get you the ability, that does give you the ability to give them both the same text effect. Great question. I'm glad I had an answer to that. We struggled through it a bit, but we got there. Okay, so that's the FX tools. Super powerful. Again, nobody uses these tools. I mean, they're really cool, but they rarely see any. They rarely see the light of day. But it's one of those things that I want to showcase to people because they can increase your composition by basically justifying your composition by adding light to the subject itself and to the background. Okay, I've saved my favorite for last. We're going to talk about special effects. Special effects are super cool. I'm only going to, you know what? This is not the image I wanted to focus on. I want to focus on this image. So special effects, for those who don't know, are in the filter menu. Okay. They're in the add section. So once again, they're destructive. Okay. Which means we're going to duplicate our background or my background image. I'm going to call this image my, let's just literally call it my backup image. Okay. So whenever we're interacting with filter menu stuff, we're gonna back up our base image here, just so we can always have it as a reference point. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the special effects menu, and I'm gonna talk about the ones that I actually see practical use for, because a lot of these are really wacky. Let me just showcase where they are once more. So I have my layer selected. I have my add function opened in filter menu, and it's just located fourth from the bottom. So there's a bunch. There's so many. Yeah, I mean, where to start? You've got ones like typography here, threshold changes. You have some sort of visual looking effects like somber or like film grain effects. You have one that literally makes your image look like a collage of different Polaroid photos. You have one that strictly contours. Let's just try this, see what it looks like. It's going to open up a menu that allows you to try these values out, basically. So it'll allow you to sort of adjust where you see the contours. This is actually pretty cool. I might play around with this one. It wasn't the one I had prepared today, but I actually I like that. I don't think you can, Barbara. Sorry, no, not right now. Not in this version of the product. Oh, I'm going to add 2 effects to this image. The 3 that I really like is crosshatch, dauber, and dramatic. I like these 3 a lot in my image, and I'll showcase how I'm going to use them. So I'm going to add a dauber adjustment to my image here, and I'll just keep the intensity as is. That's good. Like I don't need to make any adjustments here. But when I make that a change, you can see that now applies over top of my original image here. So on its own, this isn't great, right? It's not that nice. But in conjunction with masking, okay, and some opacity adjustments, then this gets really cool. So we're going to add a mask to our, let's rename this. I'll call it dauber. I'm going to rename dauber, add a mask. And what I'm going to do is I'm truly going to erase just the claws and the face. And in order to erase a mask, right, we need to do what I suggested earlier, right? White, when it comes to mask, means the effect is turned on. It's applied to the image. Whereas black is turned off or hidden. And so because we don't have an adjustment layer, we're not turning an effect on or off. What we're doing is we're seeding to the image below it. Meaning we're turning off the black portion that we draw on our image to the image that appears directly beneath it. And the way we draw in relation to a mask is by using the brush tool. So I'm going to click the brush tool, and I'm truly going to draw on my image here. I'm just going to draw black. And as you can see here, boom, it removes the dauber on that part of my image. Everybody could see that, hopefully. I'm just going to do it on the claws too. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to justify a couple portions of my image here. Everybody can see that. Yeah. Top marks. 5 out of 5. GPL Lafleur. That's exactly right. I'm creating a hole, right? Because if I was to remove or hide my background image, there's your hole that you're referring to, right? So I'm creating a hole through my effect to my backup image. Now, this gets even cooler when I get to lower the opacity on my whole dauber image. So not just the mask, but the whole image. If I reduce the opacity, I'm just getting a subtle little bit of that, but I have a highlight on my background where the face and claws are. Okay, let's try something new. Under my backup here, I'm going to click on my backup. I'm going to go to clarity, and I'm going to pop the clarity on this image, okay? Like almost egregiously so, I'm going to pop the clarity. Because clarity exists beneath the dauber, but above the backup, that means this effect is being applied to only the backup layer, okay? Meaning it's being only applied to the images that appear beneath it. Let's do some other fun stuff. Let's go ahead and just like add another effect. I'll take my backup layer here, duplicate it again, pull that back up to the top. And now hopefully what you're seeing is just this image, right? What I'll do is I'll click on it. I'll go to special effect. And let's do dramatic. Let's just play around with something else. It'll open it up. It'll give me this. We'll probably change the values on this a little bit. I don't know if I want to change the opacity. I just want to change the strength. Yeah, like right there. I think that looks nice. Click OK, or done rather. And then that image pops up right here, right? We can do some fun stuff with this. So first and foremost, we can add another mask. Then what we can do is we can take our mask here that we've already made. We can right click on it, copy it. And we can take our mask that we have right here and paste as a mask. And when I paste as a mask, the claws, right? Here we go. The claws and the face will be omitted from this dramatic effect. And now I can incorporate all three. So I have a dramatic effect applied to the top, which I can feather if I want. I can use the mask properties itself to sort of change the relationship of where this is. If I wanted to, I can lower the opacity on this. So now I can pull through that dauber adjustment that exists beneath it while still getting a bit of that intensity through, right? I could even move the dauber above it if I wanted to showcase that more than the intense layer below it. And then I have the clarity, which is really just impacting the face and claws, as you can see here, right? And to showcase this even more so, you could see it by just changing the Orton levels. But if I really crank the clarity, they're just being applied there. So I'm on board with special effects. I think they're really fun. I think you can get some stuff that you just totally can't do otherwise because they're highly textural. Yeah, I think they're awesome. Just note that like when you go to add an effect like this, like be sure that you're working off of a copy, because otherwise you're going to see something like that, like when we have a mask highlighted. So that was when I had a mask highlighted there. But if I'm working off a copy, that you'll be able to sort of see those effects. And if I may, if I just showcase the before and after, like there's kind of a really cool motion to the change of this image. And I can crank these values if I wanted to. Let's see here. If I really wanted to showcase how dramatic of a change these are, I could do that. You know, you can see how thorough these are in regards to the composition change. So I really like those in conjunction with masks. I think they're really fun using masks. Anyway, that's kind of it for today. That covered, I didn't get a chance to cover tilt shift. So maybe I'll do that before we end off. But we covered liquefy, refine edge, layer effects, and special effects. And then finally, tilt shift is so quick and easy. I'll just showcase it really, really fast. Tilt shift is a tool, that is that changes the sort of, oh, I'm so glad, Marv. Thank you, Florence. Thank you, Joseph. That changes the how does tilt shift work? Basically, it changes the area, the subject area that you're looking at. It changes sort of, it almost blurs the background out in your image. I'll showcase what it looks like. Tilt shift historically is like a fun way to make your images kind of have a miniature-esque effect to them or appearance. And I'll show you why. Just have to remember where this is. Sit it under add, tilt shift. There we are. So whenever you're looking at an image and you're like, oh, that kind of looks like it's making the buildings look smaller than they are, it's because it might have a tilt shift effect to them. I'm just going to use the default settings and click done after having moved my tilt shift preset. And this takes a while to apply, but it gives it kind of like, because of the way it blurs it and chooses the selection and the subject area in your image, it kind of gives it almost like a miniature-esque appearance to it, almost like you're looking at an exhibit in a museum rather than the original. So just a kind of a before and after, you'll see how the way that it blurs and sort of changes almost the direction of the lens in your image. Again, very subtle effect, typically used to sort of depict cityscapes, and like really good for like overhead shots or maybe even drone footage and such to get this kind of effect. But yeah, just something worth noting that it is a sort of a kind of a one-click effect that has a really fun sort of effect that applies to sort of small star cityscapes. Yeah, and that's that. That is it. Okay, I'll answer Melissa's question because this is a great question. She asked, "How do you flatten an image?" Let's make some bird adjustments and flatten it, Melissa. So note that you're so welcome, Ian. Thank you so much. Thank you for getting up at 6 a.m. to participate in this workshop. Appreciate it. Thank you, Dilla. Thank you, Marv, as always. Like what I said, this will be on YouTube. I'll try to get it uploaded the next couple of days. Andy, this recording will be on YouTube, on our YouTube page. I will. I believe I'm Windows 10, Bill, but I'll double check. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so Melissa had a question in regards to layers. Let's say I have a bunch of changes to my image. Let's say we are doing clarity, increase clarity. Let's say we made a split tone adjustment where I added greens and then some reds to the, let's say some greens to the highlights. And then I'm going to lower my opacity on my split tone and my clarity. Let's say I'm going to mask it just localized to the face. Or let's say I'll take it off on the face. Okay. And let's say I have one more version of my image, and let's say I'll do another special effect. And let's try out that fun, wacky effect that we were looking at earlier. Thank you so much, John Fedor. Glad you enjoyed it. Thank you, Pia. I'm going to add this wacky effect we were looking at earlier. And I'm going to make a, let's do an overlay. Or actually, let's say we do a soft light. So you can see that. Okay. Melissa, hopefully you can see that I have multiple layers. Okay. Multiple layers impacting my image. And you're like, I don't want to just save a JPEG of this. I want to continue working on my image, but I want to flatten everything that I see here. Okay. To do that, we click on any number of our images here. And I think what we do is we functionally just click on the merge layer down icon. And that's going to add it to this layer. And then I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to do that. And so I've merged all three of those layers together. Now I just have that one. Note that this is lossy. Obviously, you're flattening an image. Of course it is. This is a destructive change. But you wanted to know. So that's how you know. Yeah. Does that help, Melissa? Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, Bill, when you're at the end, please let you know version. Oh, yeah, I'll double check the version. I'm pretty sure it's Windows 10. One momentum. Yes, Windows 10. Okay. Freddie asked, can you remove glare from glasses? You're welcome, Bill. Okay, unrelated to this, but you asked at the end, so I appreciate that. Glare from glasses. Now, when you say glasses, do you mean eyeglasses, Freddie, or do you mean like cups, like glasses for drinking? I guess it doesn't matter, but specify, just because faces are sensitive. Yeah. Well, glare indicates to me that they're overexposed, right? So the only thing I can think of, let's see if I can find a person with glasses on them. I think I've got a person with glasses. Let's see. Yeah, here's a guy with glasses. I don't have a person with glass glare, but let's see if I can showcase this. Here's my suggestion. Okay. This guy has glasses on. Presumably you're talking about, like, I don't know, there's like a piece, there's a pop of glare or something like that in your image, that's kind of that, you know what I mean? Kind of has an effect on one corner of your image. Would be a burn? Oh no, dodge. Yeah, it's sort of like a whited area of your image. Let's just treat that, for example. I don't know exactly how it would look, but the suggestion would be, Let's see if I can do this. My suggestion would be to do this. You want to burn that area, right? You want to do a dodge and burn effect. So I think what you want to do is go to exposure, reduce the exposure, and then you want to take your exposure and make the mask black. So what that's going to do is it's going to basically hide that effect in the areas that appear in black in your mask. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to paint on white on your black mask. And what that's going to do is help hide that area. And maybe you want to increase the exposure or the contrast to sort of fix that part of your image. Basically, that's the only thing I can think of, although that needs some work. There we go. That's the only thing I can think of to help you with your glaring issue. Because, yeah, you need to correct it with the, okay, so it has to be the opposite, right? Like, and so glare in this case would require you to sort of underexpose that part of your image. I would play around with that. I would try that. That might help. You know, there's certain things that, depending how sharp the glare is, might be actually very hard to remove. But play around with that. That'd be my suggestion. Other ways you can do the same thing. You can use levels and curves to do the same thing. You can play around with those instead of exposure. You might even be able to get some effects in light EQ. So I would focus on these first 4, try them. All of them would require the same effect though. Basically, you would apply curves, apply some sort of egregious curve effect just so you can see it. Set the mask black, which turns it off, and then paint on the affected area using the opposite of black, in this case, white. You'd paint that on, and that would, and then you need to just sort of justify the composition basically afterwards. That's a question for Freddie, Marv. That is a question for Freddie. But yeah, I can see that there might be people that would like have composition thoughts in regards to that. But hey, he asked, so I want to answer him. Thanks so much for the question, Freddie. Okie dokie. That's kind of it, guys. If anyone has any other questions, throw them in chat. Otherwise, I'm gonna basically edit this video and get it upload on YouTube. Thank you, Bruno. Merci. Thank you, Reiner. Thank you, Marv. Thank you, Ian. Oh yeah, I guess somebody also mentioned using the repair tool to take out glare. That certainly would worth kind of a brain fart on my end, but that would be worth trying as well. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Jim. I hope all of you guys have a great rest of your day. I'm going to schedule some more workshops for February and maybe the beginning of March. Yeah, take it easy. I'll see you next time. I'm going to mute my mic now. I'll try to answer any other questions if there are any. Also, just please feel free to reach out to me on the community portal.